Hello and welcome to the Fertility Foundations podcast, where we go into detail about how to prepare the foundations for a healthy pregnancy. We dive deep into the underlying root causes for fertility issues and natural solutions. I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not broken. I hope that by sharing these episodes, this will help you move from feeling overwhelmed and lost to feeling hopeful and empowered to take charge of your own path to parenthood, because there are actually lots of things that you can do to help rewrite your own story. I'm Sandra Greenbank, nutritional therapist, functional medicine practitioner, coach and educator, specializing in fertility, pregnancy and postpartum health. I'm also the founder of the Fertility Nutrition Center, where you can find fully trained experts in nutrition, lifestyle and functional approaches to healthy fertility and pregnancy. You can find out more information over at www.fertilitynutritioncenter.org and also book a free strategy call with one of our experts. Today I'm speaking to Jenya Di Pierro all about herbs, homeopathy and the power of natural medicine. Jenya is, in my opinion, one of the best kept secrets in the wellness space. She's an incredible healer, an all-round wonderful person and a very skilled practitioner. Jenya is the founder of Cloud 12 Wellness and Lifestyle Club in Notting Hill. She's a naturopath and herbalist and has been awarded the prize for outstanding contribution in the field of natural medicine by the College of Naturopathic Medicine. Jenya's practice supports a range of health conditions through her specialities are hormonal and gut health, fertility, and autoimmune wellness. Her interest in wellness was sparked while living in Japan, but her passion for natural remedies was born 10 years ago when she witnessed the power of plants and intelligent nutrition when her father fell ill, and she has also overcome her own health challenges using a naturopathic approach. Jenya's work begins by a full assessment and testing before drawing up a bespoke treatment plan that encompasses nutrition, lifestyle, herbal medicine, and homeopathy. She makes all her own bespoke herbal remedies in her botanical pharmacy, which is stocked with 300 different herbs from all over the world. I have personally worked with Jenya, and the results have at times seemed a bit like magic, so I'm really excited to talk to her today about her work. But before we get into the interview, I wanted to mention our podcast sponsors, Neovos. They're a UK lab that provide at-home health tests and cutting-edge analysis. I personally like the vitamin D and omega-3 tests, which are absolutely crucial to get right for anyone trying for a baby. Knowledge is power, and in my opinion, you need to always check, not guess, your levels of omega-3 and vitamin D so that you can supplement correctly if you need it. I found the Neovos test really easy to use and affordable too. The Neovos team have kindly offered our listeners a 10% discount on their website using the code fertility at the checkout. Their website is simply www.neovos.com. All of these details are also in the show notes for you. Now let's get into today's interview with Jenya. So Jenya, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Sandra.
Please, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jenya Di Pierro, a naturopath with a diploma in herbal medicine and homeopathy from the College of Naturopathic Medicine. And also 5 years ago, I founded a wellness and lifestyle club called Cloud 12 in Notting Hill, which encompasses different types of wellness, physical, mental, emotional, but also social and environmental.
And I have so many things I want to talk about, sort of about the things that you have at the club and all the amazing sort of wellness technology you brought in. But that's probably for another podcast. We're going to talk today about women's health, mainly hormonal health and herbs and homeopathy and how that can help in addition to all of the other lifestyle things that you're doing at home. So can you explain, first of all, how herbs and herbalism can contribute to our health?
Yeah, for sure. Hormonal health is my favorite topic because I do focus on female health and also autoimmune wellness. And my first profession is a herbalism. Well, before I quit finance or after I quit finance. And essentially, I fell in love with plants when I was actually trying to help my dad overcome a serious illness and started to doing various courses in nutrition and herbs. And then there was this wow moment when I realized the immense power that plants have and how this knowledge is disappearing in our modern world. And we need more people to kind of revive it and spread the word. And that's when I signed up to do a herbal diploma course. And essentially, plants absorb vital nutrients from the soil in order to thrive and survive. And this is exactly what they do to our bodies. So they support various organs and tissues with their phytonutrients. And what's amazing about them is that they're basically food. So our body understands them really well and absorbs them way better than, any pills, especially pharmaceutical medication. Herbal medicine actually is still used as primary form of medicine by about 80% of the world population. And of course, the data is skewed a bit by the Chinese and Indian people, but even 25% of pharmaceutical drugs are derived from herbs. Most famous being aspirin, which comes from willow bark. But the problem there is that they're stripped of the cofactors, which first of all affects the absorption, but also kind of magnified certain characteristics that then can cause side effects if they're kind of out of balance. And I had quite a few, especially when I started practicing as a herbalist. And, I always thought the herbs are gentle, side effects are rare. They're very, very soft on the body, which is true. But then I had patients coming with me on steroids or antibiotics. And, one woman has been taking them for 3 years, for example. And then I've given her herbs and they cleared the condition in 3 days. And I was kind of shocked. How is this possible where antibiotics, couldn't do that anymore? And then, of course, I realized how, well, first of all, our body can develop resistance to anything, like even herbs, but also pharmaceuticals. And secondly, it is just so close to how we eat and how we live our lives. So sometimes they just go in and they're way more effective than anything else we kind of take medicinally.
That's really interesting. And also I really like the idea that it's an ancient wisdom that has been used safely for so many centuries or for such a long time. And, I've been to your house and you have this incredible kind of setup where you're steeping and creating all these amazing vinegars and all of it, it's just a nurturing way also even to connect to nature and to connecting to those plants and then kind of passing them on. And, and I think there are a lot of, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies are looking at herbs and plants and kind of looking at what is the active ingredient in that. For example, ginger or turmeric, and then they strip out the one bit and then they kind of concentrate that and try and, and you're saying, and I can connect with that, if you take out one piece of the plant, it might be the one thing that the studies have shown is actually effective, but also you're missing the potential protection or, whatever it is. And like turmeric, for example, is better absorbed with black pepper. And that's how you would have it in food.
Yeah, absolutely. So, turmeric, I think it's most effective in the traditional Indian preparation, which is curry. So, turmeric needs oil and turmeric needs black pepper for absorption. But actually, kind of interestingly, I have to confess, this is one herb that I like to use in supplement form rather than, our traditional herbal preparations include tinctures, powders, teas. And tinctures is basically a herb macerated in alcohol and water solution. Phytochemicals are extracted in this way. And it's excellent because alcohol is a great carrier and it kind of absorbs directly into our bloodstream. And, because we don't metabolize very well these days, don't have sufficient enzymes and stomach acids and so on. Sometimes, tincture way of administering herbs is actually quite effective for those people who would struggle to break down the capsule and so on. Having said that, it's quite known that turmeric is not terribly bioavailable. It's so hard to absorb its phytochemicals. So supplements did a great job at creating liposomal forms of it with the black pepper and everything else that it is. And so that's actually one example where I would go to supplement companies to use it. But to your point on all of this kind of ancient traditions, of course, we don't have as many clinical trials because often we're not backed by pharmaceutical companies, and the method of trial is quite different because we look at the cause of the condition. So, 10 people with amenorrhea or absent periods, I will give 10 different formulations because the cause can be completely different. It can be stress related, it can be gut related, and so on. So it's difficult to do a trial with the same herb on 10 people with condition. But actually, some of the formulas, they go back thousands of years. And that's a lot of evidence, anecdotal evidence, but nevertheless. And actually, one of the this kind of revelations earlier on in my herbal career that I mentioned regarding steroids. So the woman was taking steroids for her psoriasis, and I've given her this ancient Ayurvedic formula to reset skin. And she called me in 3 days and said, my psoriasis is completely disappearing. And I was shocked because I was like, okay, we need to start you on the diet. We need to do all of this protocols. We haven't actually, I've just given you the herb. This is my first step. As you know, for conditions is best to work on a 3-month basis where you look at different pillars of health, lifestyle medicine, stress reduction, the diet, supplements, functional tests if needed, and so on. And then she gets given this herb and everything starts improving. Not to say that we don't need to continue with the rest of it, but that formula has been used for 5,000 years. And it still proves the best there is for resetting the skin. Isn't that amazing?
And you could use that. Would you use that for just psoriasis or?
Well, actually,
just skin.
Not really. In Ayurveda, it's called ama clearing. We digress a little bit from hormonal health, but actually, this is the basis of all health. So ama is basically toxins. And then there are 2 concepts in Ayurveda. There's ama, which is toxins, and there's agni, which is digestive fire. So basically what we need to remove ama, which is basically called ama clearing formula, which removes the toxins and improves various elimination channels like kidneys and liver and gut and lymph and so on. And then you boost agni, which is your digestive fire, digestive health, so that all the foods that you take and so on are assimilated well. This is actually how you can basically solve 90% of your cases, right? You remove all of the kind of negative factors, stress actually being one of them. So that's always need to be taken into account, but also kind of toxic lifestyles and so on. And you kind of give body the power to function and at its optimal way and absorb everything efficiently. And then the body just does the self-healing after you've looked after these 2 factors. Now in modern medicine, it becomes a little bit more complex. We now look at circadian rhythms and sleep and rest and how people exercise and what kind of infections then they've been exposed to and what kind of trauma, emotional trauma especially, that they've gone through that affected their health and so on. But the big picture, 2 main principles, they're actually pretty much the same as Ayurveda stated 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, so you're bringing the body back into balance to allow it to do its own healing.
Exactly.
I mean, I could go on forever and talk to you about homeopathy. Oh, sorry, about herbs, but also you do homeopathy.
Yeah.
And recently added homeobotanicals, which is like mind-blowing for me to even kind of try and get my head around. So could you explain a bit about what that is as well?
Sure. So basically, if we talk about the three pillars that I use, having said that, I do believe that it should always be food first, like all of us. And absolutely, ideally, we should just maintain ourselves with healthy diets and so on, right? But when we have chronic conditions, then we do need this extra support from other modalities. So plants work on various pathways. They have phytochemicals that bind to receptors and, do their work. And that's quite scientific and, can be analyzed. And then homeopathy is this amazing invention by Hahnemann, who was actually a doctor 200 years ago, and looking at various practices of that time that were quite harmful to human body. People used bloodletting and mercury and other kind of poisonous medicines that were helping with a few things, but eventually kind of killing the patient. So he started looking at very, very diluted forms of those substances. And his hypothesis and his great revelation was that there is an energetic component to everything in life. I mean, we know it now. We can't quite prove it yet, but quantum physics is onto something there, and various people call it intuition or sixth sense and whatnot. So his hypothesis was: what if I dilute these substances greatly and just kind of use the energy of a plant or a mineral to heal people? What is going to happen? And the results were incredible. So he found that the energy of those substances also has efficacy. And then there are about 3,000 or even more of homeopathic remedies. And interestingly, they're not just made from minerals, plants, or animals. There's homeopathy made from rainbow. There's homeopathy made from X-ray, which is actually very effective for radiation. There's different types of homeopathy that use energetics and chakras and crystal healing and divine light and so on. And for me personally, the reason I got into homeopathy is that I found in my practice that so many people got ill after they suffered a particular trauma. So you can be talking to someone with diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis, something sort of unrelated to emotional trauma, and you ask them, when did it all start? And they would say, well, it happened when I lost my mom, or when I broke up with my partner, and so on. And then you understand that there is a layer, a block that is sitting in your body, which is not allowing it to function its full potential. That self-healing is blocked by certain kind of layers. It can be a layer of toxicity, from many years of pharmaceutical medication. There can be actually some genetic layers as well, and from a long-term illness, which basically depletes our vital force. It's actually quite known that pharmaceutical medication depletes our vital force. So essentially, people after being sick for a long time and taking this medication, which suppresses the vital force, they need a bit of a kind of spark of energy to get them back on track. So what I found that homeopathy was very, very effective on this kind of emotional layer, which for me was very difficult to reach, with herbs and supplements. And if people suffered from shock or people who've so ill that whatever you give in them, they just can't assimilate it. Their vital force just needs to be woken up. And so homeopathy, essentially, it's just a sugar pill. So chemically speaking, there's just sugar and water. And for this reason, actually, it's suitable for kids or pregnant women or elderly who are not a lot of medication. then basically no contraindications. So to give you an example how it works, aconite is a very famous remedy for shock, but also for kind of onset of colds and flus and so on. And if the symptoms match, because, in homeopathy, there are about, 20 cold remedies, right? So in aconite, the onset is sudden and person is like a little bit frightened and can be kind of hot and cold. And the fever can actually rise quite quickly. So you give homeopathy and it does not kind of suppress or make it go away. But what it does, it can magnify symptoms slightly to let the body process it quite quickly. The analogy would be, when you have a fever and you take a hot drink and you get hotter, but then you sweat it out and the disease leaves you, which is much, much better way to get back to balance than, say, taking anti-inflammatories, which basically disable body's defense and the infection just spreads and it takes longer to recover. So we've got homeopathy that basically works on energetics, and we got herbs that works on the physical body. And then there's this person in New Zealand, maybe 50 years ago, who created a cross between homeopathy and herbs, where you take a diluted form of a herb, but not as diluted as homeopathy. You still have some phytochemicals in there, but they're very, very mild, so nowhere near therapeutic dose. And then you succasse, which means like you kind of shake it a certain number of times to let the water kind of spread the energy of that plant and make it kind of energetic as well as physical. And this form of preparation, I just started using recently. I've seen completely incredible results. I still myself find it hard to believe, but one of the, as you know, one of the areas where I find it particularly useful is gut health, where when we work with dysbiosis and a lot of pathogens and parasites and so on in the body, we normally would give, antimicrobials, black walnut, sometimes garlic, sometimes wormwood, podarco, especially if yeast is present and so on. So you kind of do a herbal mix and everything comes down. And then 6 months later, patient comes and says, I'm bloated again, I'm having all the symptoms. And all of that comes back because of the biofilm, which are these colonies that microbes form that are very hard to penetrate just with kind of normal medication. So it's like a protective layer which sits underneath that you need to break through. And this homeobotanicals work so amazingly well on that particular issue. And the way I kind of explain it to myself, it's a very hard layer to penetrate for supplements like enzymes or antimicrobial herbs and so on. Energy, it goes through anything. The energy goes through walls, through distance, and so on. So energy must be penetrating the biofilm, and that's why when I use homeobotanicals in my practice, I always start with herbs anyway, but then when I use homeobotanicals, the effect was kind of finite and symptoms don't come back because it's to be so effective at this biofilm disruption, in my opinion. And again, there are no kind of trials and clinical studies on it. So it's just the experience of myself and this group of people who are using homeobotanicals. They've been doing it for 50 years. And there's so many things in life that we don't understand, but they still work. And actually, amazing of them are the ones that we actually can't understand.
I'm going to just talk about my personal experience, actually taking the tincture that you gave me, which was, we had a chat recently and, I've been going through some personal stuff that's been quite tough. And you gave me a tincture and you sort of didn't tell me what you believed it was going to do. So I don't, it's not like I thought something was going to happen and then it happened because I manifested it. But I actually have been, because I got my allotment back in April and I saw you, I think, in July. And since I got my allotment, I've been having terrible hip pains because I've been doing I did something at the very beginning where I was trying to clear the plot, and it's given me a really bad hip pain. And I was thinking, have I got arthritis? Like, what's going on? I'm getting really old and my body is falling apart. And, I don't know what you gave me, but the day after I started taking it, I texted you because I went for a walk and my hip got so bad and it was clicking. I could hear it. And the person I was walking with could hear it. And I was like, there's something really wrong with my hip. I'm going to have to go to the doctors. But anyway, the next day, or even that evening, the pain was completely gone. And this was a daily thing that I've had to, I couldn't sit comfortably. I couldn't walk comfortably. And it's still gone now. So it's been 2 months now. And actually I haven't even spoken to you about this because I'm sort of still so kind of like, what was that you gave me? And you obviously was trying to support me with my emotional, but then was the hip. I truly believe that physical, your emotional, whatever might be going on emotionally can manifest physically in your body in different ways. And so I think that that's what's happened. You've worked on the emotion and it's got rid of the physical manifestation. But I 100% attribute that hip pain going away with taking the homeobotanicals.
Yeah, well, actually, I think you've taken homeopathy because you've taken the sugar pill that day, didn't you?
The drops.
Oh, the drops. Okay. So essentially,
I took pills as well. So yeah, it could be the homeopathy.
Yeah. So, the drops, so homeobotanicals are a little bit more specific. They go to work on the gut health or, whatever the focus hormonal health. But with homeopathy, essentially what happens, we all have our characteristics, mental, emotional, physical. And essentially, the role of a homeopath is to match this footprint with the right remedy that has very similar descriptions. So, when you look at the remedy that, for example, I gave you, you would find certain kind of characteristics that match to how you presented to me. But this remedy actually doesn't work on any particular symptom. So I've given it, for the emotional stuff or what you were going through. But actually what it does, it increases your vital force and it increases self-healing mechanism of the body. So with the right remedy, everything gets healed. It's just that the body starts, correcting those imbalances. And it's very, very often that you work with some hormonal issue or emotional issue, and the person comes and says, and this got better. Actually, sometimes, very interestingly, because like you said, it was clicking a little bit. As I said, the symptoms sometimes get magnified. And sometimes the person's saying, I had this pain in my hip 10 years ago, and all of a sudden it reappeared, and then it was gone. That's actually really amazing because that means that it was still sitting there as a blockage, as a layer, not allowing for some kind of processes to happen, and it went. And actually, the best is also when people say, "Oh, I spiked a fever." Fever in homeopathy. Actually an amazing thing. We always ask, when did you last have a fever? Because that's a sign of a vital force being strong. That's a sign that your army, is there and is possible to fight, is capable of fighting and has all this necessary ways of killing disease. Because if a person comes to me and says, "Oh, I haven't had a fever," or "I haven't had a cold or a flu for 5 years," that's not a good thing for me, because they've been exposed to pathogens. They've been, in those situations where they should have had a fever, but maybe their vital force was not strong enough and it was kind of lingering, and maybe they felt a bit sluggish. And, eventually they got over whatever they had. And that's not a good thing. Having said that, there's about 10% of superhumans that very strong vitality who never get ill. And it's also possible, but, you don't often see them in your clinic.
I mean, now you can see that in children, can't you? They can spike a 40-degree fever, and then the next day they're totally fine. And whereas we as adults, we might be sort of grumbling a bit around sort of 38 or 37 point something for a week, and just kind of then you feel exhausted for another couple of weeks afterwards. And that's and I actually went to a talk once by another homeopath who works with children, and she said, try not to give the children Calpol because you're kind of putting a lid on that.
Yeah.
You know what's going on. And actually, if you use, I think she also mentioned was the aconite or whatever it is, but actually, and the fever helps the body's immune system complete the complete cycle. So, what your body needs is actually the resolution at the end, which you don't get if you're using a drug to suppress your body's innate function. And then over time, you're then potentially hampering your immune system from working as well as it could. And I think that a lot of adults probably do feel like they don't really get that fever anymore.
Yeah. And, if you think about fever or infection as also excess toxicity, right? Because microbes and viruses produce toxins. That's why we have aches and pains and so on. And when you have that fever, it's like a very strong detox for the body. You want it to burn through you and also sometimes, you sweat it out and so on. So you want to get that release. You want once in a while for your pathogens to be killed. And it might not be even ongoing infection. We have pathogens in the gut and so on. It's like kind of resetting the button on your microbiome in the body and on your vitality. So it's a great cleansing, the fever.
That's so interesting. Anyway, we're here to talk about hormonal health and endometriosis and PCOS ideally. So what, obviously you're part of the Fertility Nutrition Center and we'll work together, and we're all on board with the diet and the lifestyle and everything that's, we all know works, but sometimes people need a bit of a helping hand. Certainly if a condition's been with you for a very long time. So let's talk about endometriosis then. How would you kind of address this as part of, with your herbs and your homeopathy as part of the overall protocol?
Yeah. So as kind of we know now, endometriosis is the imbalance of the immune system, which kind of manifests in various hormonal dysregulations, right? So the root is very much in the gut and translocation of the microbes from the gut to the bloodstream. And then, they obviously travel to the uterus and cause this inflammation that then results in these lesions, endometrial lesions, which can actually go way beyond uterus into fallopian tubes, into pelvic cavity, sometimes in the lungs and so on. So there are quite a few causes, but for me, the starting point would be always to look at the gut and look at the kind of overall levels of inflammation. Quite often, so, endometriosis is often categorized as autoimmune condition. Also, not everyone agrees. And at the core of it is our leaky gut. So it's the gut that's been under attack by either, some lectins and gluten and some other irritants, or in fact, microbes. So the focus would be first to heal the gut and to use antimicrobial herbs like barberry root, black walnut, wormwood to calm the dysbiosis. And then, use the vulnerary, as we call them, so kind of healing herbs like marshmallow root and slippery elm to actually close this lesion, the tight junctions of the gut and stop the translocation of toxins and microbes into the bloodstream. So these herbs, they form kind of mucilage. And when you take them, you often take them as a powder. So it's like a glue that covers the digestive tract. And by the way, it will help everywhere. It will help, if you have gastritis or any kind of irritation of the upper digestive tract. And herbs often, they're very versatile. For example, barberry root, it's an antimicrobial, but also it's a beta liver herb. So it will help with liver function. And as we know, liver is our clearing organ for hormones. So when we talk about endometriosis, it's accompanied by estrogen excess in the body. So we have a few problems, along various pathways. One, liver not clearing it efficiently, and we end up with either too much or kind of more toxic forms of estrogen. And for that, we need our liver herbs and bitters in foods and also in herbal medicine. They're the ones that stimulate bile production and then kind of enhance liver detoxification. So you can look at dandelion root, barberry root, Schisandra, andrographis, and so on. So you take care of the liver. Then you take care of the gut in terms of kind of leaky gut and dysbiosis, but also, as we know, there's kind of reabsorption of estrogen from the gut. So we kind of want to calm that down so that there is no additional supply of estrogen via that pathway. So take care of the gut. Then, of course, there is also kind of supply of xenoestrogens, and everyone knows how to take care of that, reducing plastics and toxic exposures in our environment and so on. So basically, you look at various sources of excess estrogen, either endogenously or exogenously, and also some other factors like stress and obesity that kind of also speed up conversion. We call it aromatization. So basically conversion into estrogen, which is another source of excess estrogen in the body. So there are quite a few pathways that you're working with herbally. So I already mentioned the gut and the liver with regards to sort of calming herbs. We've got passion flower, Californian poppy, ashwagandha. Herbs like passion flower, for example, they bind to GABA receptors. So they have GABA-like effect on the body. So as I said, herbs can be broken down to phytochemicals, and, we can kind of link them to receptors that induce certain functions in the body. Ashwagandha, actually, I love also as a herb that does calm stress, but it's an adaptogen. So it will support your overall vitality and immune system. And it's also a fertility tonic, especially for men. So, when I work with my clients, I create a formula picking out of 10 herbs that calm stress. I would pick the ones that also relevant, for the immune system, if they have a weak immune system, or, for the sperm count and so on, because one herb can cover quite a few pathways. So you're kind of creating this a mix of loads of different actions that would cover the conditions of endometriosis. And then, of course, we know that the result of endometriosis is often heavy, painful periods and clotting and a lot of blood loss, which results in anemia. And so working, with supplementation, but also supporting mitochondrial function of the body to give more energy, because people are kind of exhausted. And as I said, you need to give them vitality to even start on this healing journey, because it's not easy. And so adaptogens that work on adrenal function of the body, they either modulated. So if you have really heightened stress response, they kind of calm it down. Sometimes it's disrupted, right? You have a lot of cortisol in the evening when you're supposed to have it in the morning. So you kind of very tired in the morning, can't function. But then at night, when there's time to sleep, you are completely awake. And that's when sort of your adrenal function is a little bit messed up. And what adaptogens do, they normalize it. So they restore the right rhythm of those stress hormones. And they also kind of protect, they very, very gently build your immune system to give it a stronger protection from infections.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said there.
Yeah.
I just want to say to anyone who's kind of like furiously writing down all these names of these herbs that you have to work with a herbalist to actually, and I personally wouldn't even self-prescribe, even though I know a fair bit about these things. I'm not a herbalist, and I think that, they can, because they are so powerful, they can also be harmful. So
yeah, it's a very good point, because actually one group that I haven't mentioned, which is very relevant, are hormonal balances. And one of them being Vitex, which is absolutely incredible. It is the herb that's still studied and not well understood, because certain things we just don't know how it works, but we know that it works. Essentially, it kind of resets the button on pituitary and normalizes production of LH, FSH that then control our estrogen and progesterone. And in addition to that, Vitex and few other herbs like red clover, black cohosh, they are phytoestrogens. And phytoestrogen is an incredible group of herbs for either estrogen excess or estrogen deficiency. So when we're deficient in menopause and so on, obviously they come in and they give us this extra source of estrogen, and a healthy source, because as I said, there's unhealthy xenoestrogens and plastic, which push estrogen down harmful pathways linked to unwanted growth. And then this is a gentle pathway of healthy estrogens. But then when we have excess of estrogens in the body, because they're gentle, they actually bind to the receptors and they compete and kind of kick out some of the more potent, more aggressive estrogens. And so in this way, they reduce the levels of estrogen in the body when it's in excess and when it's unwanted. And isn't that amazing? How it just the herbs often get in the body and they do whatever the body needs, upregulate, downregulate. They just get in and they figure out what it is that the body needs, and then they restore those pathways. And I would agree with you. Vitex can actually. I always like to check some hormonal levels like LH, because so Vitex, it can increase or decrease or modulate, let's say, estrogen. It decreases prolactin. It's actually one of the herbs very, very useful for the luteal phase in the menstrual cycle, which is the second part of your cycle, where you want to prepare your body for pregnancy after the egg is released, and for that you want healthy progesterone production, and Vitex is known to increase progesterone and kind of help body prepare for pregnancy. But also it does increase luteinizing hormone. And in some conditions like PCOS, it might be already raised. And you can, in a very few cases, I actually haven't had that many cases, almost nothing, but it can alter menstrual cycle. So you need to be very, very careful of administering. In the end of the day, it's medicine. And self-administering herbs in therapeutic doses, I absolutely do not recommend. There are so many pathways that you need to check. So, for example, licorice peony, white peony combination. It's amazing for polycystic ovarian syndrome. But licorice also drives your blood pressure, so it can cause hypertension. These things need to be checked. And I absolutely am for taking herbs, as culinary herbs and foraging and having a bit of fun with herbs and so on. But when you suffer from a chronic condition, you need to check for interactions. You need to understand the pathways. You need to understand the therapeutic doses as well. So I would recommend going to.
And you did mention Vitex, which is also Agnes Cast, people know it by different names.
Or chasteberry.
Chasteberry. So this is same. But this is one that I find that people just hear about, or maybe it was a little bit more popular a while ago. I'm not sure if it's still as popular. There's sort of this trends in these things, isn't there? But it's one of those things that people just buy and take. And you absolutely shouldn't.
No. That's actually one of the herbs I'm most cautious about in my practice when I work with hormonal imbalances. Because, as I said, there's 5% of cases. And, sometimes it has to do with genetics, right? Because we know that Vitex works and so on. But there are genetic SNPs, which means that the pathway just won't be active. And the people people kind of might react to it when you're thinking it's going, one direction, but it's actually not converting to what you need. And potentially it's that. Because it's kind of interesting, just going a bit into details, but Vitex is very much indicated for PCOS. And we know that very often people have elevated luteinizing hormone, and yet it kind of works, and it's supposed to push it up, but I'm looking at more and more research that says that it's more regulating than pushing it up. But in those cases, you absolutely need to do your checks.
We're looking at blood tests and whatever it might be.
Yeah,
but so you mentioned PCOS. So again, PCOS is something that we see all the time, and I suppose most problematic with that also is that you have very long cycles. You have to wait a very long time for your ovulation, or you might not have one at all.
Cycle at all. Yeah.
And so how do you approach PCOS?
Yeah, so PCOS is similar to endometriosis in the sense that gut plays a role, stress plays a role, obesity plays a role, and quite often you do have estrogen dominance, but the main, of course, characteristics is androgen dominance. So testosterone being in excess, causing symptoms like facial hair and acne, and also affecting estrogen production and on ovulation. That's why people don't ovulate or, don't have periods. So a big focus, in addition to everything else, would be to control for that and to reduce testosterone in the body. So the two herbs that we use are already mentioned, one being licorice. So licorice actually prevents conversion into testosterone from its precursor hormones, but also licorice is a very, very powerful kind of natural steroid. So it basically reduces inflammation in the body. And as we know, both endometriosis and PCOS is accompanied by inflammation. So it kind of doing two things, reducing testosterone or conversion into testosterone, as well as calming the inflammation. And then we've got our white peony, which speeds up conversion of testosterone into estrogen. So estrogen is made from testosterone via a process called aromatization. So it kind of clears testosterone more effectively and converts it faster to estrogen. But interestingly, as I said, sometimes you do have also excess estrogen, PCOS. It kind of pushes us down a less harmful pathway. So in theory, it's kind of creating more estrogen in the body, but it's actually creating healthier form of estrogen. So it does not have the symptoms of estrogen dominance that we have of kind of overgrowth and breast tenderness and clots and so on. And another characteristic of PCOS, as you know, is elevated blood sugar and insulin resistance. So we work with a lot of herbs that balance sugar. And one of my favorite ones is Gymnema. It's an Ayurvedic herb, and it's actually translated as a sugar destroyer in the body. And in India, people who sadly don't have access to insulin, they use Gymnema instead. So it's very, very powerful at stabilizing sugar levels. Also, barberry root. So its active component berberine. That's as well. Our lovely spices, cinnamon, fenugreek. You can use them in foods and so on. I love the preparations where you can just use it in food and kind of forget about it as medicine. But when you're working therapeutically on a chronic condition, you kind of need to make sure that you're giving therapeutic dose and so on. But for general maintenance, because one day I want people to be off herbs and just use them as little helpers in your curries, taking herbal teas. I love medicinal vinegars where I basically add also, so I've got the immune version, which is called fire cider, with garlic and horseradish and thyme and rosemary. All aromatic herbs, by the way. They've got volatile oils that increase your defenses, so they boost the immune system. So, anything you can find in your garden which smells nice or not nice, like wormwood, it will. But I like, my culinary preparations to taste nice. So I've got this version where basically I macerate. I add herbs into apple cider vinegar for about 6 weeks, and then I strain, and I've got my immune boosting, vinegar that I use as salad dressing, and I add it sometimes into soups. And then I do a bitter version where I add these herbs, maybe a little bit harder to get a hold of, for general public, but I use my bitter herbs like gentian, artichoke leaf. It needs to be not really, and some spices, because this is the bitter helper, I call it. Really nice.
I love that one. I'm obsessed with that one.
Yeah,
and you do have these at the clinic as well to purchase.
Yeah. I do that. These ones I actually kind of mix in my own kitchen, so I cannot do a massive production, but I do have them in my clinic. But what I've also done, I have created, herbal formulas for general concerns. So when I see someone for consultation, they all get bespoke, formulations that relate to their causes and symptoms and so on. But then, I had people over the years who were saying, can you just give me something to boost your immunity in winter? Or, I don't have time for all of the protocols, but I really need a bit of energy. I'm going on this business trip, or I have a time in my life where I really need this extra boost. So I created an adaptogen mix, that would boost energy, give more vitality, called Kickstarter. I've created an immune tonic. It was actually during COVID, so it works for a lot of, viral symptoms and chest infections. It's called Game Changer. But the beauty of herbs, as I said, they're not actually, specific for one thing. So herbs are almost never antimicrobial or antifungal or antiviral. They're actually all of those things. And of course, you'll find more research, for example, for, let's say, Podarco monoin for candida and yeast, and then maybe olive leaf or elderberry is known more for viral. But that's not to say that they don't do all other things. It's just that there is the research been done focusing on these properties, because what they do in the body, they kind of wake up the immune system that will then figure out what to fight and how. So when you have, virus or microbe or what have you, what you do with herbs, you just boost your immune system that then deals with it however, it decides best for the body. That's why it's great. In medicine, we always need to know, do you have, a viral infection or do you have microbial? Then you do antibiotics, which obviously will not work for the virus. And it's very, very specific. And with herbs, it's not. It's just kind of fights anything with the right tools.
It just helps your natural defenses, again, do what it needs to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And so what about ovulation then? Because I find that this is one thing that actually can take a bit of time. It can be quite frustrating. And again, looking at the sort of 360 health, I often recommend reflexology or acupuncture, but do you have herbs and tinctures that can actually help bring on a period or regulate the cycle or help it happen quicker?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we do need to look at the cause, right? So, we know that cortisol and stress and so on can affect ovulation. So, if that's the issue, you'll be working with that. We know that you need a healthy amount of estrogen that needs, for ovulation to happen, because there's a positive feedback at some stage between the estrogen, FSH, and LH. LH is a hormone that triggers ovulation, right? So we kind of need to make sure that you've got sufficient amounts of estrogen for that feedback to happen. And so the phytoestrogens would be very good for that. also, there's a group of herbs that's called emmenagogues that you often give to kind of stimulate the period, and that almost kind of wakes up uterine muscles. So we've got a condition called, well, in Chinese medicine, it's called qi stagnation, blood stagnation, and a lot of endometriosis and fibroids and those kind of conditions linked to stagnation in the pelvic area, where you sort of need to improve the tone and, let's say, kind of healthy contractions of the uterus and improve the circulation in that area. And herbs like motherwort and Angelica sinensis, which is Dong Quai, and also raspberry leaf, they're the uterine tonics that help kind of tone the muscle and help for this to kickstart that process in that way. And then, of course, progesterone plays a role because it's fluctuations that's what eventually triggers the period. But I would say the most work would go into making sure that ovulation happens. And then that's how kind of the period happens. But with regards to this uterine tonics, it's actually a very interesting topic in herbal medicine because it's also used to prevent miscarriages. And you often think, okay, can you do it? Because you might overstimulate and, you cause the loss of the fetus. But again, like often in herbal medicine, they make sure their uterus at the right tone. They would never overstimulate and kind of harm the body in that way. So when we have a very weak tone, that's when the loss happens. And we want it to be kind of a bit strong and contracting in a more potent way, but it won't kind of send it into over contraction, then that it will, induce some kind of miscarriage. That's why actually raspberry leaf, it's safely given in the third trimester in pregnancy and won't cause any kind of loss. It would actually just help healthy contractions to happen when the time is right, essentially. So this group of herbs is often used to kind of tone the uterus and help, for the menstrual cycle to happen. But as you rightly said, for the healthy period to occur, it's the ovulation side of things that's important, and for that, we know that testosterone reduces or affects estrogen and basically turns off ovulation. So removing excess testosterone with licorice and peony, building healthy estrogen with phytoestrogens. So all of those herbs will go into ovulation support. I like seed cycle as well. You use that too. So quite a few herbs at our disposal for that.
This I've said I wasn't going to keep you more than an hour, and I think it's been an hour. But I actually, even though I've been doing this for 15 years, and in conjunction with Herbalist, it was always a bit of a mystery to me. So it was sort of like, I'm going to recommend this herbalist. You're going to go and see them. It's a bit mysterious to me, but it's really effective. That's sort of like in my head. That's how it went. But actually, you've really made me understand it in such a different way now, because herbs work not just on the physical level, which is obviously what we mainly do in nutrition. Is we work with the physical. We do address the mental, emotional as well. But you've then got the other layers of kind of the subconscious and the energy, and how you can kind of almost get to that as a shortcut.
Yeah. I'm a big believer also in kind of manifestations and gratitude. And I believe that the healing always happens when you kind of are in positive vibrations, on the scale of consciousness. All this stuff like fear and jealousy and anger that keeps us down, that's actually very, very difficult for healing to happen at that level. And when you experience gratitude and unconditional love and just joy at doing silly little things that you enjoy, that make you laugh, happy little moments with friends and family, playing with your dog, anything, even like watching, your series that might be silly, but they create some positive response in terms of the energy in your body. So when you've elevated these vibrations, that's when it's very, very conducive to healing. That's also when we make the right decisions. That's also when we have the energy to implement those changes. When our path is clear, we're more connected to the universe. And then, you bring manifestations to it. Imagine yourself in a perfect state of health, with a healthy period, and whatever, the baby, and manifesting as if it's already happened, happy family and so on. That's actually very, very powerful. And again, can't measure it, but I know it works. And it should be kind of part of everyone's fertility journey. And I actually wanted also to mention one herb, if you have a few minutes. I haven't actually mentioned it, but it's just a beautiful, very unscientific legend about herb called Hishawu. In Latin, it's called Pelargonium multiflorum. And if you Google it, you will see a very, very interesting picture of kind of a naked female and male. That's how the root of this plant looks like. And according to this doctrine of signatures, which says that the nature actually has given us clues what herbs will be helpful for. And there was this Chinese man who was 100 years old, and his 100-year-old wife trying to get pregnant without any luck. And then he dug that vine in his garden, and he's like, oh my God, this root looks very, very fertile. And then they've taken it, and she had lots of babies, and they've lived until 300 years old. So it's a very beautiful legend. And since then, all the Chinese believe that this herb kind of can give them eternal life if they find a root which is 1,000 years old and so on. But anyhow, so they use it as the elixir of fertility. It's actually so the man and his wife reversed their gray hair, and then they had beautiful teeth and so on. So it's like an elixir of youth that, phytochemically speaking, is actually considered an adaptogen. But, there's beautiful legends that, if anyone has spare time, also really nice to read, to get you in the mood for a certain herb. And this herb is actually used for an unexplained infertility, because sometimes we don't know why. We've checked everything, right? And sometimes the issue is with your energy and the fears and that side of things. We can't measure in tests at this moment, but of course we discover all of this in consultations, and we have tools to help people overcome it. And actually homeopathy is also a great tool, because it helps with fears and anxiety and so on. But sometimes there are these herbs like Hishawu, false unicorn root, and also shatavari is another very important fertility herb, asparagus root. And they are sometimes just used as a general fertility tonic, and sometimes in cases where we also don't know. But we know that they've been used throughout centuries with positive outcomes. So
interesting. But you mentioned Chinese herbs, and obviously there's a difference between Western herbalists and Chinese medicine.
Not quite, because I've trained in all herbs. So it was, I don't know every Chinese herb. So Chinese herbalists would know hundreds more. But actually most adaptogens are Chinese, for example, and hormone balances come from China. Well, also kind of Mongolia, Siberia, it's sort of the same area. And Western herbalists doesn't necessarily focus on Western herbs. Depends how they were trained. So at the College of Naturopathic Medicine, we were trained in American herbs and Western, Indian, Chinese. So we kind of use them across the board. But there's a Dr. Christopher, who is a famous herbalist. Back in the day, he's like a father of herbal medicine. So he only used 10 herbs in his practice, and he cured most conditions with them because, as I said, herbs are very versatile. So it doesn't really almost matter. I like a little bit broader because, well, also you kind of want to explore. I do read research, and, I like discovering kind of new actions and applications of herbs, but it very much depends on the person. You can actually work with a limited range of herbs, focusing on the core component health, like stress, like infection side of things, and detox pathways, and you don't need that many herbs for that, actually.
Right. So, I think we've established that you shouldn't do this on your own. So if somebody wants to get hold of you, what's the best way to connect with you and to find you?
Yeah, so the best way is to connect either by Instagram, which is Jenya Di Pierro, or write to JDP Clinic. So it's JDP Clinic at cloud12.co.uk. So either by email or Instagram is the best way.
And you see clients from Cloud 12 in Notting Hill, as well as online?
I can do both. Give people a choice. They can either come and see me at my clinic at Notting Hill, Cloud 12, or we can do sessions online. Then I would send herbs and homeopathy as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Sandra. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I really enjoyed this chat with Jenya, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please like, save, share and rate this podcast if you found it useful, as it helps us reach more people. Also, don't forget your 10% discount on tests with Novos using the code FERTILITY at the checkout. And if you're looking for a fertility specialist to support you, our practitioners can be contacted over at www.fertilitynutritioncenter.org, and they all offer a free strategy call to help you decide on your next steps on your journey. Thank you for listening.